Hey folks, Josh Packard here with you. Really glad to be invited into this incredibly important conversation about faith, mental health, and Gen Z. And I had the opportunity to learn a lot about this topic when I was the executive director at Springtide Research Institute. We kept hearing this topic come up over and over again. And so I decided that was just one of these things that we had to tackle. We put together one of the largest data sets, maybe the largest data set in the country, about how religion intersects with mental health for Gen Z. And I'm now the co-founder of this organization called Future of Faith. And at Future of Faith, we believe that listening is sacred. And we try and do research and build tools to help people like you do what you do better. And you can learn more about that at futureoffaith.org. But it's between those two experiences that we've come into... I would say I've gotten a lot of exposure to how not only how acute this issue of mental health is among young people, but also exactly where this intersection lies between these mental health issues that they're sort of dealing with at both a very real, almost sometimes like a crisis level, but also at this very low-lying, constant level, and conversations about faith and spirituality and religion. And I think that, while these might seem like separate issues, part of what I'd like to make the case for today in this presentation is that these are in fact very real and interrelated issues that have an important role for you in particular to play, that can not only support young people's mental health, but also can lead to a more flourishing church. So let's take a look at let's just sort of take a broad look at the overall picture of youth mental health. I mean, it's a crisis. Lots of people have called it that, especially here in the state of Colorado. That official designation and term has been used, and we've all seen the headlines, right? They're not good. I mean, they're disturbing. Even more though than these sort of national headlines, you've probably felt this in your own life. I have a 13-year-old. We feel this in our own household every day. Lots of our friends then are at the same stage with with their own kids who are living through mental health struggles. And I think, regardless of whether you're sort of seeing this through the eyes of your own children, through the youth that you serve, or through these headlines that you see in the paper, the facts just seem really clear. Young people are obviously struggling with their mental health these days. But there's more to the story than just the struggle. And that I think is a really critical thing for us to remember and understand. There's also good news here in that, they're more willing, young people are more willing to talk about these issues. And this opens up an opportunity for us to be able to rebuild the trust that has been lost with this generation when it comes to organized religion and the institutional church, and even in religious professionals themselves. So, while there's a problem there, I think if we can show up in the right ways and that we have really important, things and tools to offer them from our position of faith, that we can actually engage them in ways that will be incredibly productive for them and for us. In this presentation, then, what I want to talk about a little bit is a little bit of what I've learned from the research about mental health and religion, but also I want to talk a little bit about the work that I've done since then at Future of Faith, where we've managed to uncover some critical things that you can do, not only to support the mental health of young people, but to do that critical trust building work, not only with those young people, but also with their parents. Because in many cases, the trust that young people, or the lack of experience that they have with the church, is coming because their parents don't take them to church. Their parents have lost trust and faith. And so we want to talk about what that entire system of care might look like, and share some of what we learned there. But I don't want to do that just from an abstract level. So I'm a sociologist, was a professor for a long time, went and ran a research institute. Part of what got me frustrated was that no matter how hard I tried to bridge the gap between big national study, lots of data, important and valid theories, into actual daily practice with people, we were just having a hard time bridging that gap. So what I want to do after we talk about some of that stuff is to actually share some of what we've been learning in the field at Future of Faith, and I'm gonna share one of the tools that we've been working on that helps to combine. It's one of these research informed tools that you can start to implement right in your own ministry right away if it appeals to you. But also I want to share then a case study with you from a local ministry that I know particularly well, that's been implementing some of, in fact, redid their entire program, as you'll hear, based on this data and this research to show you what it looks like really on the ground when we commit to addressing young people's most acute and felt needs first, and then coming alongside them for the long haul with the conversations about faith and spirituality. But before we get to any of that, let's just take a quick look, sort of jaunt around the headlines, as disturbing as some of them might be, and get a sense for exactly what it is that we're dealing with. All right, so in this first slide, let's take a look at how Gen Z is thinking about their own mental health, and we're going to dive in a little bit more on the next slide as well. And what we've asked them to do in this sort of self-report survey, what the researchers have asked them to do here is to sort of rate their own mental health. Is it good, poor, excellent, whatever? And what you see here on the left-hand side is that more so than any other generation, Gen Z is saying that they're the least likely to report that they're in very good or excellent mental health. And then what you see on the right-hand side is some of the reasons that might contribute to all of that. They're adults overall are concerned about mass shootings, for example. Gen Z is more stressed about them, or reports being more stressed about them than other adults. Now, this is not entirely surprising. I mean, youth, your teenage years are often a place of high stress and high turmoil and lots of, trying to figure out who you are and where you fit into the world. And there is certainly some, Gen Z's comfortability with talking about mental health leads to more reporting than it might with other generations, which is why I think that left-hand measure about reporting very good or excellent as opposed to how many of them are reporting problems, I think this is a really good indicator because it's not as stigmatizing. But it also gets into some of the more systematic, a peek into some of the more systematic things. So right before the pandemic, for example, Cigna did a big study about loneliness and found that for the first time ever, it was the youngest generation that was experiencing the highest levels of loneliness. The same scale that Cigna used, has been implemented by social scientists going all the way back to the 1970s, and it's always the oldest cohort that has the highest levels of loneliness. It's our senior citizens for obvious reasons, I think. So this data here about being in poor mental health lines up with some of the other sort of turning of the tide things that we've been seeing when it comes to the entire world of young people. They're lonely, they're stressed, and they're reporting mental health that is just not as good. We see here again how concerned, so they're not reporting being in as good mental health as other generations, and how concerned are they about this? Well, they're pretty worried about it. So most adults worry about their mental health. About 34% of most adults are concerned about their mental health. But for young people, it's like 43% of them are worried about it. So it's not only is it a thing that they're feeling in their lives that they're sort of not, doing as well as they want to, but then they're worrying about it a lot as well. Of course, the pandemic did not help any of this, which is not, entirely surprising. So during the lockdown and being separated from friends, but also I think that an important part of this has gone maybe unexamined a little bit, is the residual or spillover stress. I mean, I know even in our own house, like as much as my wife and I tried to shield our son, not from the pandemic, of course, like he knew a pandemic was going on, but I mean, if you're anything like us, especially in those early days, I mean, you're sort of watching the stock market crash and people get laid off, and you're worried about your family and your own health, as well as the health of your extended family and loved ones and friends, and you're trying to do the right thing as parents to let them in on as much as they should be, but also not let that entirely affect them. But what a lot of the research is showing is that they pick up on that even if they didn't hear about it. Of course, living in that kind of high stress environment where everything is chaotic and shifting all the time feels unstable and unpredictable. And so there were a lot of other impacts that went along with this. You see the emotional abuse and physical abuse that unfortunately is so often associated with living in these kinds of chaotic environments that picked up during the pandemic. So what all this wraps up into, then I think we get a hint at on this slide, right? If young people are living with this sort of constant awareness of mental health, they want the people and institutions and organizations that they interact with to reflect that back to them. They want to engage with places that are also aware of what's going on in their lives. And so this is not about the church or religion, and commerce is distinctly different than that. But we get some hint at what their expectations are by looking, I think, at this graph. So this is essentially, a listing of the values that young people want from the organizations that they engage with, and they put mental health right there at the top. And as the church, I think we would do. It would be really smart of us to take this into account. But we have a dilemma. We can't go around treating all young people like they're having a mental health breakdown at every moment. It's not feasible. I mean, in fact, while 1/3 of them, express some kind of emotional distress, according to the research that we did at Springtide, and that is certainly alarming, it still means that at any given moment, 2/3 of them are doing more or less okay, at least when it comes to their mental health. I mean, you never know with teenagers about the other stuff going on in their lives, but in that regard, it's still, even though 1/3 is very eye-opening, it means that the vast majority of them are probably doing all right. And more importantly, that 1/3, 2/3 breakdown is probably not the breakdown in your own community. Your numbers are likely to be wildly different than that. So while the national numbers are interesting, I'm not entirely sure how useful they are. You're not the minister to the entire country. You're the minister to a small group of people. And it's nice to know what kind of world that our young people are living in, especially in an age of social media. Like it's useful to get a sense of, at some level, at least the sort of air that they're breathing and the water that they swim in, right? What are the giant topics of conversation? But that utility has a very low ceiling. It's not the thing that's going to transform their lives. The relationship that they have with you, talking through the important issues in their lives, that's going to be the thing that makes the difference for them. Secondly, the other part of this dilemma is that while I'm sure you care deeply about young people's mental health, most people in ministry are not trained mental health professionals. In fact, you're trained to do other things really well, and we need you to do those other things really well. You're not typically equipped or sometimes even empowered, frankly. I know some of the places, I've heard some of the stories about, youth ministers being told explicitly not to address mental health. So not trained or necessarily empowered to be the primary point of care in a young person's and mental health. And third and last, unfortunately, you don't probably have the resources in your church or in your congregation, in your campus ministry, to interact with every young person as though they're in crisis. We probably cannot be that thing for them. But we can't just sit around and do nothing, not only because we care about them, but also because, y'all, we have one of the biggest keys to mental health flourishing that has ever existed: faith. So all of the research that has ever been done about the intersection between faith and mental health shows positive correlations, positive associations. This comes from, we're going to look at a couple of things from Gallup here. This is Gallup report that they released recently, summing up all of the research that they have been doing. And you see this snippet here, and I'm not going to read the entire thing for you, but it's that last little set of a couple of sentences in that first paragraph. It says, weekly religious service attenders are, in fact, more likely to say that they are very satisfied than those who make $100,000 or more in annual household income. And then they go on to say that these findings update a long line of studies confirming the connection between religion and well-being, making it one of the most researched and robust findings in all of the sociology of religion. And Gallup has been tracking this now for decades, and their summation is that, look, this is consistent, it's overwhelming, it's as close to anything that we've got as a fundamental truth of human nature. Religious people report better mental health. And that encompasses a wide variety of religions. It's everything from Sunday attendance, going every Sunday morning Christians, to making sure that you never miss synagogue, to people who pray and are spiritual on their own. There's a wide array of possibilities that people can have to engage with this, and all of them end up in better, more positive mental health. They, Gallup, along with the Radiant Foundation, then did a worldwide study about faith and wellness, and it's well worth checking out. You can download it if this is the kind of thing that interests you. But I'll cut right to sort of the heart of the matter. You see the quote there to the right: a systematic review by Harold Koenig, an incredibly well-regarded researcher from Duke University, concluded that religiosity and spirituality are positively related to optimism, self-esteem, hope, coping with adversity, lower levels of depression, anxiety, suicidal tendencies, and psychotic disorders. Religious involvement has also been found to be related to less substance abuse, less crime, and greater well-being. So we've got this incredible tool, which, is, I think, you could be interpreted as like God has given you this tool to help positively impact the lives of all people, but in particular, the group that's experiencing the most mental health issues right now, which is young people. You're in the right position with the right tools to be able to have an incredible impact. So the dilemma is that we have to do something while knowing that we cannot do everything. Our own research at Springtide confirmed this same thing. We asked, this is just 13 to 25-year-olds in the research that I led there. Religious young people say they are flourishing more than their non-religious counterparts, and you can see, the breakdown by slide. And we not only did quantitative research at Springtide, we did a lot of qualitative research as well. And you can hear in their own words, you see Lana saying, just being grounded in my faith and attending church services, just sitting there for an hour, not looking at my phone, just listening to nice things and being reminded that there's more to this than my immediate suffering. That was very valuable to me. And I think that's kind of the reason I haven't left my church, said Lana, 24. Sometimes we may overestimate what young people need. Sometimes they just need a place to sit and hear nice things and have a reason to not be doom scrolling on TikTok. Jade, 22, says, I think my faith makes me feel less isolated and less alone, back to that loneliness issue that we talked about earlier. And I think that when I feel less alone and less isolated, I have better mental health. Okay, so if that's the dilemma, that we can't do everything, but we have to do something, we have this incredible opportunity in this tool, what is the solution? How do we actually do that? How do we activate the faith and spiritual lives of young people so that they can thrive? And I think part of this answer involves a little bit of rethinking about how we approach mental health. So often when we say mental health, what we actually mean is mental illness or unhealth. We don't really talk about mental health unless somebody's having a problem or a breakdown. And I don't think that's right. And not only is that not what the term means, but I don't think that's how Gen Z is thinking about this topic. When they say mental health, I think what they're talking about, if you listen closely to them, what they mean is something much more akin to physical health. Like, you can be in bad mental shape, just like you can be in poor physical shape. But you can also be in good mental shape, just like you can be in great physical shape. And so I've used these images here on these slides of the tangled single line of thread on the slide earlier, and then the knitting here on this slide, because I think it represents this shift in how our thinking should occur. That for this generation, especially, mental health is not like siloed off in one part of their life. Like, they're not going to go to a therapist to fix their mental health and then consider that fixed and then do these other things in these other boxes. These are much more integrated. And I'm not saying that they won't see therapists. I'm just saying that when they go, the questions that they're asking are not like, okay, fix this, and then I'll fix this other thing. They see all of this as much more related, and they're talking about it much, much more often across all parts of their lives. Sometimes to an extent and in ways that makes older generations feel incredibly uncomfortable. Like, I can only imagine how my grandparents would feel if we were sitting around talking about mental health and wellness and illness and things like that. It was such a taboo topic for so long. So I think we need a more holistic approach in our ministries that sort of stitches these things together. But we can only do that if we imagine that mental health, if we imagine mental health holistically. It's not just a deficit, but it can also be a positive. And when we think about it this way, the question becomes not how do I fix these broken kids or deal with their lack of health, but rather how can we make our churches and ministries places that are mental health friendly, where young people can thrive no matter their mental state or condition. And in fact, are constructed in ways that that make them able to be resilient to the other places that are actually kind of harmful in their lives. And I first came up with this idea or this thought about what, mental health friendly when I was a professor at a state university teaching public health. And I did this thought experiment with my students, and I asked them to design an institution that would create mental illness. It was not that we wanted to actually build it, but just like as a thought experiment, again, just so we could uncover some of the characteristics. I just sent them off in groups, and I said, okay, what would it have to look like to be actively bad and harmful for somebody? And then so they go off in their groups, and they sketch some things out, and they have some conversations based on the readings and other things that we've been doing. And after some discussion, then they come back and they start describing this to me, and I'm putting all these things up on the board, and then we get to the point where it's like, okay, do you know any place that actually has all these characteristics? And they had essentially designed a university, like the place that they were sitting in right then. They said, this is a place that would actively be harmful for somebody's mental health. And they listed it off. They said, it's really hard to navigate if you don't have insider knowledge. The expectations are incredibly high, and so the pressure is even higher. Everything that you do here has ramifications for, your whole future. You can't find any one person who has all the answers. Everybody that you talk to sends you to somebody else. Maybe they have a piece of it, but they don't know no one person, can tell you everything that you need to know about even how to register for classes or how to, which prerequisites that you want. Information is very much disseminated, or direction even is disseminated. They have competing interests pulling them in many different directions. They've got work, they've got families, friends, addition to schoolwork and internships and all kinds, social clubs and all kinds of things. And everybody's telling you that thing is the most important thing. And then you're often disconnected from your friends and your family and your support systems that you've developed all the way up to this point in your life, and on and on. And that was, to them, that was the image of like what an organization would look like that was particularly unfriendly. And I carried this image and this thought with me as I went to Springtide, and we started thinking like, okay, well, what would the opposite of that be? That's how we designed that entire research project. What would a mental health, if we know that, okay, these things make you, like, this is a situation primed to actually be really harmful for somebody, what would a situation or organization or set of characteristics look like where somebody could heal, somebody could flourish? And we started thinking about mental health friendliness. So what does it mean to say, that something is mental health friendly? Well, the data and research that we did at Springtide resulted in a few things. So sort of the mere opposite of the things that my students came up with in our classroom. And time again, when they described sort of the places where they felt the most at ease, where they felt like they could flourish, where they had the most support, what came out of it were three things: connection, expectations, and purpose. And I think we can build our ministries around these three things to create mental health friendly spaces where we open up the opportunity to talk about important things around spirituality, religion, faith, God, etc., not as sort of a bait and switch, like come for the mental health and stay for the God, but as a way of doing these things together, because these things are so integrated. So let's take a look at each of them in turn, and I think you'll see what I mean. So connection takes us right back to that thing that we were talking about earlier in the presentation, where so many young people feel so lonely today. And when they talk about a mental health friendly space, it's a place where they feel like they belong, that they're networked in community. Even the irony of young people feeling so alone, I understand. They're connected on their devices to the entire world, and yet they walk around feeling like nobody really knows them. So we want to build these spaces of our ministry really to be centered around personal, one-on-one relational connection, and then one to small group, and then we can build out from there, which is, I think, it's easy enough to say, but I understand how for a lot of people with their existing models, it's sort of revolutionary in practice, because so much of what we've been doing in ministry has been to gather lots of young people together and then to break them off and get to know them based on, after they've already come because they were attracted to the thing. In fact, I heard from a campus ministry not too long ago who said that they used to throw this big party at the beginning of the year. They would invite everybody to come, free pizza, all the music, all the things that normally attract college students. And then from that event would sort of kick off the entire year for them, and they would get names and contact information, and they would follow up after that. And what they've been doing lately actually is just flipping it completely on its head. They realized that coming to a big anonymous gathering was sort of intimidating for a lot of 18, 19-year-olds away from home for the first time. The same thing that got me really excited about going to college in 1996 was sort of intimidating for today's young people. And so instead what they do is they spend the whole year meeting young people, trying to get to know them, students, and then at the end of the year, they throw a big party, bring everybody together. They've been bringing them together slowly throughout the year. But by the time they throw the big end of year party, they said it feels more like coming home than going to a sober frat party, which is how they described their beginning of the year kickoff bash that they used to throw. And I think that's a really interesting, again, like I think it highlights how revolutionary this model is, but regardless of how you go about doing it, this connection really has to be at the heart of it. The second part of creating a mental health friendly space is around expectations. So I thought, being the skeptic that I am and the researcher that I'm trained to be, I thought young people were just going to tell us that they really don't want to have all these expectations on them. They just want to be able to do what they want to do. But that is not the case, especially in places where their passions are. So for my son, it's band. For others, it might be academics or sports or whatever. They really want high expectations and they want adults to put those expectations on them. But for their mental health, they need the tools that they are given to meet those expectations to be in alignment. So in other words, if we're going to set a standard for young people, we have to give them the assistance and the guidance and the tools to be able to actually achieve those standards, not a set of tools that helps you to do something else. My son complains about this all the time, actually, to go back to him one more time. He's really into band. He can get all the free tutoring for academics that he wants. He can get pulled out of gym or other electives to work on his math or his social studies or whatever, if he needed that, but he can't do it for extra band practice. And that's a good example of the place where the expectations and the tools just do not align for him. And it creates a certain amount of stress in his life because then it spills over into trying to figure out how to practice more in other places to meet these sort of standards that he's holding himself accountable to and that the adults in his life are holding him to. The last one I think we have in our ministry almost by default, which is purpose. I think a lot about, I don't know, many of you may not be all that far away from being a teenager. At 45, I have to dust off the cobwebs to try and recall what it was like to exactly be a teenager, although I try to keep it front of mind. And one of the things that always comes through clear, though, is just how much stuff young people do that they have no idea why they're doing it. They're just doing it because somebody told them. They've learned that it's easier to do it than to put up a fight or a stink. Often in academics, this gets translated into that very, famous phrase of, I'm never going to use this, which I'm sure any parent has heard from their kid. Why do I have to do this? I'm never going to use it. Mostly, I think, in relation to math, it seems, or history. And I think as an adult, if I had to deal with that, I just wouldn't do it. If I had as much stuff coming at me that I was being asked to do and I didn't know why I was being asked to do it, I think I would just stop doing that stuff. Young people don't have that choice a lot of times. And when they do, they often opt out, but many of them don't have the choice. And so they want places where that purpose alignment is really, really clear. That they want to be working on something that is connected to helping, engage with something bigger than themselves. And I think our ministries have all this kind of baked into it, that there's really an opportunity here to, with a few tweaks, we can, and I think actually, honestly, some messaging around look, this is a mental health friendly place. We're creating an environment, or as you're going to hear Jeff talk about here in a second, an ecosystem of care where you can come and be at peace. We know your world is stressful. We know it's tumultuous. This is not going to add to that. This is going to be a place of respite. It's going to be a place where, you're going to find community and connection. You're going to get the tools that you need to succeed. And you're going to be, you're going to be connected to something bigger than yourself. You're going to enter into a story that isn't just about you. And when we can do all of that, what the data show, what the research is telling us is that these are actually mental health friendly spaces where young people and our ministries can actually really thrive. In these next sections, then, before we close out our time here, I want to share with you one very specific exercise that we've been working on at Future Faith that can help you create a mental health friendly space or begin to integrate some of these practices of connection, expectation, and purpose sort of right into your already existing ministries and start to reimagine relational ministry maybe just a little bit. If it's not useful for you, don't use it. If it is, great. But I also wanted to take some time then to sort of show what this might look like at an entire ministry level. And so we're going to close out then by looking at a case study of a local ministry that has really taken this notion of mental health friendliness and built an entire, like what you'll see is an entire ecosystem of care around it with ministry right at the heart. At Future of Faith, we believe that listening is sacred. And I want to just share with you one of the tools that we've been building. And if you want, everything that we do at Future of Faith is free. So you can come over to the website if you're interested. I'm not trying to sell you anything here. You can sign up for the newsletter, and if you do, I'll make you a lock solid promise that if you sign up for the newsletter, it will be the newsletter that you get that has the most emojis of any newsletter that you get. Cross my heart. You will not get more emojis than the ones that you get in our newsletter. But at our website, too, we have a bunch of tools that you can download. Our intent is not that anybody would use all of these, but that you might find one that will help you listen in a more systemic way. Because I think part of the answer to creating spaces that are mental health friendly is like, well, how do we do connections, expectation, and purpose? What does that really look like on the ground? Well, it's really relational. And what we want to do at Future of Faith is to help you think like, okay, well, how do we scale relationships? Not just scale them up, but also out beyond yourself to volunteers and down. How do you get deeper with young people faster to get to the issues that they care about so we can really impact their overall lives? One of those ways, a core piece of that all the research shows is about listening. And this exercise that we developed called Text to Connect, a lot of you are probably texting with kids often. A lot of people in ministry are, but what we walk you through in this exercise is about like a sort of systematic way of reaching out to young people on a regular basis through a series of questions. Because part of the issue, if we're going to think about relational ministry as a gateway into creating these mental health friendly spaces, there's a limit to like how many kids can you really interact with in a week. And so we've got to start thinking about, how do we track information that we're getting from them? Every interaction should be written down and captured in some way, but in a way that we can easily access. And so in this exercise, we walk you through a series of prompts over a course of a number of weeks. And then it's just coaching you very simply color code a spreadsheet with your own emoji or a color. I guess if you just want to use a color, we like the emojis. So that okay, that kid has been responding in a way that it sort of feels like they're not doing great over the last 3 weeks. That's the kid I should have coffee with this week. And so we're not just relying on your own impression anymore. You're doing a little bit of data collection, but also by what we talked about, scaling those out, right? Now it's no longer just you having to be the one looking at it. You can share this information with volunteers if you're lucky enough to have volunteers, with staff if you're even more lucky and you have staff who are dealing with young people, or even with peer leaders who you want to connect and say okay, this person could really use a boost this week. So I encourage you to check that out. This deeply relational, trying to scale this up and out. But beyond that, we want to talk and think about, okay, well, what does this look like beyond just an individual tool, a one thing I can use in my ministry? And I want to give you a glimpse of what an entire ministry can look like in this regard. All right, I want to close out then by sharing what this looks like at an entire ministry level. My friend Jeff Neal runs our local chapter of Youth for Christ, and I think it's one of the most innovative chapters of Youth for Christ in the entire country. And they have this concept of ecologies of care, and standing right in the middle of it, as he'll explain, is addressing their mental health needs and their social emotional needs first and foremost. No strings attached. They've just designed an entire program to help do that. As he says, they recognized even before the pandemic, but then heightened because of it, that they just couldn't engage in conversations and activities around faith and spirituality because their first order needs weren't being met to begin with. And he says that they have to find a place where they can heal and belong so that they can hear and believe. And I think it's just a beautiful expression of what something can look like when it's designed at an entire, again, an ecology level, and how much the entire organization and, in fact, our neighborhoods and communities can thrive from just such a small organization. Okay, so here we go. Hey folks, Josh Packard here with Jeff Neal, the Executive Director of Northern Colorado Youth for Christ. And Jeff and I have been friends for a long time. Yeah. He runs this extraordinary ministry here in Greeley, Colorado. And one of the things I like most about it is this approach that you all call ecosystems of care. And I've been, of course, on site a lot. And I think if you just went there, you would find kids skating and hanging out, and you would think that's what was going on, but there's more to it in this ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't want to just ever hang out with kids. We are really moving the ball forward every interaction that we have with them. So that's why we have this ecosystem of care. And within that ecosystem, so with Youth for Christ, we have RMAs, it's relational ministry actions. We also do a mental health program called Rebalance. And then we've combined that in with our mentoring. Now, Rebalance and mentoring really focus on social emotional learning. So there's a really guided step to take in every interaction you have with a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And the RMAs have very guided steps as well.
But on the ministry side.
On the ministry side, yeah.
Gotcha.
And we really talk about it as there's heart ministry and harvest ministry, where we want to prepare the heart to hear from us, and then we want to present the gospel to the heart. We don't just try to present the gospel because the ground may not be ready yet.
Sure, that makes total sense. So, okay, so tell me how, that seems counterintuitive. Like, I think a lot of people think about ministries and they're like, do Bible studies, do Bible studies, do Bible studies, right? Like, what even gave you the idea that you needed to have these, like, the one-on-one mentoring, the sort of meso level of the Rebalance program, along with the actual sort of macro hangout, let's do ministry together stuff?
Yeah, one of the core features for us for a long time has been that you belong first. We knew that kids needed to be accepted for who they are, not what they could achieve. And when we did that, we started accumulating all these kids who had so many issues that we started to be able to work toward. But we needed to get real professional about it because they were difficult issues. And so whenever we really pushed into understanding, well, when is a kid most likely going to listen to us about the gospel?
Yeah.
We started looking at the science, and we started looking at a lot of your research to say, if they don't belong first, they're not going to listen to what we have to say. And then we also, in the connecting with all these kids who are hurting in these really serious ways, we also knew they needed to heal along with that belong.
Yeah.
And if we didn't help them heal and belong, I mean, I think of like the Good Samaritan, where so many people just walked by this hurting person and did nothing.
Yeah.
We can help them heal. We can help them belong, which earns the right to give them the rest of the message.
And I've heard you say it is helping them to heal and belong so they can hear and believe.
Yeah.
And I love that. It's like that missing link that a lot of people, I think, who care about young people and care about their mental health, but they work in professional ministry and they're just looking for a way, like, how do I connect these two things so that, like, I can do my job and be the resource that these kids need.
Yeah, I think of it like a soup kitchen, except for most of our kids, not all of them, but most of them aren't starving from nutrition.
Right.
They're starving from mental health. And so if we have the key to that, I think I should feed them because they literally are starving. So if I can feed them because that's what God's heart has called me to do, that presents to us literally the quickest, most efficient, most powerful platform I have ever seen to move the gospel forward.
Okay, and then so as we close out here, just tell me a little bit about the impact. Like, what do the numbers say about how well this is working?
So we just ran our annual report this week, actually, and I looked at a couple of things that I compared. Was our annual budget increased by 134%. Our annual attendance increased by 201%. Our conversations, our spiritual conversations increased by 356%.
Wow.
And our baptisms increased by 566%. So 134% to then all those others. I have never found something more efficient to get the gospel to move forward. Yeah,
it just goes to show when you hit exactly, like, when you become a resource, I think, to meet the needs of young people where they're at, then, like you said, you earn the right to do all that other stuff. And I don't want to say that the ministry part is an afterthought, because that's not true. No. It's just that all that work that you used to have to do on the front end just to get to a conversation. And like, I remember those days of, like, it felt like, gosh, I don't know where this is going. I don't know if it's directed. And now it's like, there's a plan. It's unfolding. Anybody can work it. You've been able to hire staff who just follow the plan.
We can train it. We can replicate it. It's a fantastic system.
Yeah.
The ecosystem of care.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff. I think this is there's a lot of examples of really great ministries out there. This is just one that I happen to know really well, and I wanted to share it with you all as we think about how do we make that connection between our theology and the scripture and meeting the mental health needs that are so prevalent right now among today's young people. So thank you so much.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you so much, everybody. Not for listening to me, but thank you for doing the work that you do. I mean, I can't think of anything more important right now in this somewhat chaotic and tumultuous time to be digging in deeply into the lives of young people and to be, the commitment to being the trusted adult that they need and to walk alongside them. And so, again, as a parent, as somebody with their own 13-year-old, just it means the world to me, and I'm sure to all of those kids that you show up every day and you do the work that you do. I've really appreciated the opportunity to get to come and share some of what we've been learning and some about how I think that we can take a real faith-informed approach to creating mental health friendly spaces that can strengthen young people and in the course of all that strengthen our own institutions and our own churches as well.